everybody, welcome to Recovery Clinic. My name is Ashley and I have a super special guest here today. This is my friend Nikki. She is the Real Talk Recovery host and she has got a great message that we want to share. Before we get started though, I definitely just want to say this. I'm asking that everyone keep an open mind today, an open mind and an open heart. This is a very serious subject that we're going to talk about. It's something that I have my own personal experience with, and I think a lot of us do. It's something that I hold very close to my heart because there are a lot of people in my life that are going through this program and being successful winners at it. I'm going to let Nikki take it from here basically, but I just ask that everyone keep an open mind and listen to all the facts that we have to present today. So, Nikki,
yes,
you host your own show, is that correct?
Correct.
And what show is that?
That's Real Talk Recovery with Nicole on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere you can go live, I'm on there.
That is awesome. So you have a lot of followers, right?
I'm almost to 100K on TikTok, almost to 8K on YouTube, and scattered here and there on Facebook and Instagram. But TikTok and YouTube are my biggest platforms.
That is amazing, truly amazing. So I just want to kind of let Nikki tell a little bit about her backstory, kind of just relay what she wants to talk about today, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you guys just a little bit about my childhood because I think it's important to let you guys know where I came from. So I grew up in an amazing home. My parents are still married to this day. It's been like 50 years or something. I grew up in Hot Springs. I graduated high school there. I went to the same school from kindergarten to 12th grade. So I had an amazing upbringing. I have two amazing little sisters and our family's like super tight knit. So I guess I'm telling you guys this because I want to share with you, like, there wasn't anything in my life that was like horrible that pushed me into using drugs and alcohol. It was just something that I made the choice to do, kind of like a peer pressure thing. I was hanging out with people that were using, my boyfriend was using, and that's how I started using drugs and alcohol. The one thing I can tell you that I remember feeling differently though than everyone, I always felt like I didn't quite fit in. And so when I found substances, that made me feel like I did fit in. It made me feel right. So
I understand that completely. That was exactly the same reason that I ever started. I was chunky, I was nerdy, I didn't feel good in my own skin.
yeah.
I literally felt like if I took my skin off, I could feel, I just didn't fit in any way. And the first time I had a drink, and the first time somebody paid me some attention, that was it.
Yeah.
It was over. That was where I needed to stay because, that person was okay.
Right.
So you just kind of started, telling us a little bit about how you got into your addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about the meat, the bad stuff, the super bad stuff, the stuff that brought you down like the rest of us.
Well, I had a lot of rock bottoms. Like, I never had just like, oh, that's going to be Nicole's rock bottom and she's going to stop. I can share with you guys a couple of different situations. So the first time I ever went to treatment, I think it was like in 2003 or 4, and I went to Quapaw House in Hot Springs. I remember going there and I was like, I'm going to stay sober. I'm never going to use drugs again. Stayed sober for 6 months, had a sponsor, going to meetings, relapsed, and started getting high again. About 3 years after that, I got my first felony charge for possession of a controlled substance, Class C felony methamphetamine. And at that moment, even my parents were like, this has got to change your life, like you're facing prison time. Surely she's going to stop using drugs now. Well, they put me on probation and I ended up failing every single drug test and got sent to prison. I went to prison for a year, and while I'm laying in the bed, laying on my rack, I'm like, I'm never going to use again. I'm crossing out the days on the calendar to when I get released. And I was like, I've got to set myself up for success. So I paroled out to a sober living here in Little Rock. I started going to meetings. I started going to, had a sponsor. I got a full-time job. I was doing so well. I stayed sober for 9 months and I relapsed. that wasn't the worst time though. After that, I met my husband and I ended up getting pregnant with our son. And I wish I could come on here and tell you guys that I stopped using and that I was a good mother and that I took care of my child, but I didn't. And I gave birth to my son under the influence. And a year later, he was taken from me by CPS. And so that was the time that really changed my life forever. It made me realize that I had to do something different because all the things that I was doing up until that point weren't working. All the boxes that I was trying to put myself into, I was coming out on the other side still relapsing. So when Nathaniel got taken from me, that's when I realized I've got to make a change. Something different has to happen. And that's when I tried a different pathway. But those are just 3 of the things that I can tell you about that happened in my active addiction.
Okay. I want to tell you thank you for your transparency. I really do. And if you don't mind, I kind of want to parallel some things that happened in your life with things that mine, because I think at the end, when we get where we're going with this story, that maybe there will be, this is another way for some other people to understand your way that worked for you, which did not work for me. But that doesn't mean that it could work for other people.
Right.
So going back to, I never fit in my own skin, ever. And I would get 30 days, 60 days, and then I would relapse again.
Yeah.
And Quapaw was also my first rehab as well.
Yeah.
And last. But there were many more in between there. And, they laid the groundwork. 12-step meetings, sponsor, get connected, all of those things, which I did.
Yeah.
And I still didn't feel good in my skin. And I would end up going back out over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And mine was opiates for the most part for a very long time. It was everything, but that was my main thing. And, I could not figure out why I can't stay for any period of time any better. And I had some very defining moments, that were, anyone else would stop and go, okay, that's clearly my sign to quit.
Right.
And I'm so grateful. Now, for those of you who can't see, her son is sitting with us here today, okay? And he is a very handsome young man. At one point, I was in a rehab and I, had moved into a sober living facility and I ended up pregnant in the sober living facility. And I didn't know it. And again, did not feel right in my skin, couldn't make it work, had a sponsor. I was going to 3 and 4 meetings a day, had a full-time job. I was doing everything I was supposed to do and I just couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
And I ended up relapsing, not knowing that I was pregnant. And I lost my baby. And that's been the only time that I have been pregnant. So I understand whenever you say, why didn't these super drastic moments and occurrences in our lives, why wasn't that enough to say, okay, hello, like this is my bottom, I'm gonna stop.
Right.
And so I'll let you go on from there because, I think it's important that everyone knows where we're going with this. Mm-hmm. And so, talk to us about when CPS came and got your son and you ended up where at?
Okay. So Child Protective Services came and got my son and they put him in foster care. I wanted him to go with family. We tried to get him to go with my mother-in-law, but they denied my mother and father-in-law, saying that they were too old. They were 60 and 65 years old. So my son had to go into a foster home, and I'm super grateful because the people who had my son were amazing. Like, they couldn't have done a better job. The moment Nathaniel got placed into a home, I went into detox and I went straight into Oasis Renewal Center here in Little Rock, which was an amazing treatment center. Even in Oasis, I relapsed the first 2 weeks I was in treatment on Xanax because I was leaving the treatment center 2 to 3 times a week to go to court, go to visitations, and it was just too much freedom. They caught me red-handed in Oasis being 007 trying to get Xanax bars into the treatment center.
James Bond right here.
Yeah. And they said to me, you know, like, this is it. Your rights are going to be terminated. Like, if you cannot pull it together, they're going to keep your son from you forever. And they gave me 2 weeks to pull my act together, and I did everything they told me to do in those 2 weeks. Jumped through hoops. I mean, I just wanted to prove to them that I could do this and that I wanted to have my son back, because I felt like by relapsing it was showing that I didn't want my son and that I was failing. And so those next 2 weeks I pulled it together. I graduated out of Oasis, and then I met with my husband outside of the treatment center. He picked me up and he said, I got on Suboxone, and I have been like inundated into AA and the 12-step fellowship. Like, that's the way that I was always taught that I needed to get into recovery. And so when he came up and told me that he got on Suboxone, I was mad at him. I said, you're just trying to play the system. You're just trying to still use. You just want to get high still. And he was like, no, Nicole, I have been on Suboxone before I met you, and it helped me. I stayed sober for 5 years being on MAT, and I had never heard of it. I've never heard of it. The only thing I'd heard of is methadone, and when I had heard of Suboxone, it was when friends of mine were using in between heroin doses or, you know, just supplementing, but I had never seen anyone who had any success being on MAT. And so I was like, no, I'm not doing it. You must not want our son. You're not serious about your recovery. I don't want nothing to do with this. And I went home, and for the next 3 to 4 days, I was just calling my sponsor every day, crying and just freaking out. I knew my husband had that medication in the house, and me being the addict that I am, like, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I wasn't going to be able to just like not take his medication. This was a huge turning point for me. And so I called my caseworker, I called Dr. Mancino, and we all met up because he was a psychiatrist at Oasis at the time. And he also ran the medication-assisted treatment program that my husband had went and gone in whenever I was in treatment. And we all had a meeting. And that's when they sat me down, and I told them all the times that I had tried to get sober, the 6 different rehabs I had went through, prison, losing my son. And he said, you know, this medication was made for people like you who are chronically relapsing, who can't seem to get the significant, you know, time behind themselves and stay sober. And this could be an option for you. And I was still like not wanting to do it. But I prayed about it. I talked to my mom and dad about it. I talked to my mother and father-in-law about it. And I made the jump, and I got on Suboxone. And the first couple days were wobbly. You know, I was feeling kind of weird. But after about a week, I felt normal. And then it was like I felt normal. I wasn't craving opiates anymore. My mind wasn't consumed by just the thought of relapsing all the time. And that's when I just threw myself into therapy and threw myself into my sponsor. My sponsor was like, we got to get on these 12 steps now. And so I was working my 12 steps with my sponsor, going to meetings, sitting, you know, sharing the meeting with her. And it saved my life. That's how I got on Suboxone, though. It wasn't something that was like an easy decision. It was something that I went through every possible route before I chose that route, which we were talking about earlier. Not everybody doesn't have that opportunity now with fentanyl. Back when I was getting high 6 years ago, fentanyl and heroin were just starting to really come into Arkansas. And if it was here, I couldn't find it. And so I had the opportunity to relapse, get sober, relapse, get sober, relapse, get sober without dying. And I think what happens today is a lot of people don't even have that chance.
That's right.
You know, so sorry, I'll go on and on and on.
That's okay. That's okay. So I'm kind of thinking, what was the next step for you? What got you kind of thrown into where you are now? What did you experience?
Okay, so when I got sober, my sponsor is through a 12-step program, AA. She said, you need to wait a year before you start telling your story. But after that, you know, you should go out there and start sharing about your recovery. And so After a year sober, that's what I started to do. And I was met with so much judgment, so much ridicule. People in these programs telling me that I wasn't in recovery, that I shouldn't even be sharing my story. I'm talking people that I looked up to that had multiple years sober, just like shunning me, basically telling me that I was not worthy to share my experience, that I had no place sharing because I wasn't in their definition of what sober was. And so that's when I was like, you know what? I'm creating my own community. I'm going to start a community for people that are on medication-assisted treatment. In fact, it doesn't even matter. I'm going to create a community that's all-inclusive, non-judgmental recovery support, and whatever path that you're taking to get to where you're going, we want you to be a part of with us. And that's what I was looking for when I had came out about being on Suboxone. I already knew it was already hard enough for me to make the decision to get on it, to save my own life. I needed support, not judgment. And that's what I was met with whenever I came out about being on Suboxone.
Okay, that is powerful. Powerful. So, and if you guys will just bear with me, there's definitely a reason that I'm kind of paralleling this, okay? Because I think a lot of times, I've shared with everyone that I struggle with some mental health challenges. And with that comes a daily maintenance for that. And I do have to take medication every single day without fail. Now, every time I have ever gotten clean before, one of the things that they explain to you whenever you start on a medication for a mental challenge is that there are a lot of side effects to it. Mm-hmm. The average person has to change your medication 3 different times to find the right fit. And that, trying to figure out if the medication that you're on is a right fit, if it's working in your system, if it's working in your body, sometimes can take some time and is a very difficult and slow process.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, in my life, I have made some very, very bad decisions. Okay, and a lot of them were with drugs in my body, in my system. However, there were a couple times that I got in trouble that I did not have drugs in my system. And by drugs, I mean I had nothing for my mental challenge whatsoever because it wasn't being treated, and I had no narcotics in my system at the time. And the first instance was deciding that I was going to run from a state trooper doing 145 miles on the interstate through 7 a.m. traffic. He got me, and he was mad. The other time was whenever I decided that, and I was not, I hadn't been on any opiates for a minute.
Yeah.
Very stupid. I decided that I was going to change a prescription. Now, here's the thing. Most people would try to do, some kind of forgery for a large amount.
Right.
I changed it from 12 to 20. I mean...
8 more?
Yeah, and it gets better, okay? So, and there's a reason why I'm telling how stupid this is. The doctor had written in a black pen, would you like to guess the color of pen I chose to use?
Blue.
Blue, okay? So my point in saying this is that sometimes it's not just drugs that drive us to make poor decisions.
Right.
In my case, sometimes it was simply just not having my chemical imbalance in control. Sometimes it was drugs and alcohol, and sometimes it was drugs and alcohol and a bad chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
But, the only felony charge I ever picked up was not under the influence of drugs. It was under, the influence of not taking care of the challenge that I face every day. Just like, and we all use this particular description, or illustration, just like a diabetic has to go get their insulin every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and there's, like I said, there was a reason why I was paralleling our lives a little bit, because I think a lot of people can understand your side, and a lot of people can understand the mental health side. My point is that I made bad decisions with or without drugs. So going forward, once I got into recovery this time, and I had 2 years in a complete psychosis from drugs, I knew that my mental health was in a terrible place.
Yeah.
Terrible place. And I went to work on it, as well as 12-step meetings, getting a sponsor, doing all the things that we do while we're in recovery to get better. I didn't have to focus on just one thing. So you shared about, in your experience, you shared about whenever you decided that you were going to do the MAT, you called a psychiatrist and you called your social worker.
Yes.
Okay, and so whenever you started the MAT program, what all did you include as your treatment plan, as your pathway? What were all the facets?
Okay, so this is so important because medication-assisted treatment will not be successful without these things. You can't just take a medication and expect to be better. That's not how it works. Like, you have to be actively working on your disease, getting it arrested, your mental health, socialization with people. I was so awkward when I first got sober. I didn't even know how to talk to the cash register at the gas station. I would start stuttering, and I just felt so, you know what I mean? And so everything, I started going to therapy. I had one-on-one counseling sessions at UAMS, and then I had an outside therapist that me and my husband were seeing for our together stuff, like marriage, I had a sponsor through a 12-step program, which now when I think back to it, I wish there had been a program like specifically for people that were on MAT, but my sponsor was amazing. She was so accepting. So I had my 12-step sponsor, I had therapy, counseling, and yeah, that's about it. That's really all. But that's a lot. That's a lot. I was in meetings 3 times a week. I was going to therapy once a week for the first 2 years I was sober. Then I started going every other week until, as I got better, I got my mental health addressed. I had psychological evaluations at 6 months sober, 2 years sober, and 3 years sober to make sure that my mental health was being treated. And so it was total wraparound treatment. And that's why I think that I've been able to be successful, because I needed to also make sure that I was working on my mental health.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so tell me how you got from there to where you are now, and talk about all the different parts and pieces of it, starting Real Talk Recovery, what you continue to do with that. Definitely talk about, tapering down, getting to where you are now. I love how you're super transparent about, still being on it and being 6 years into it, but what your goal is and what your plan is, and the science behind that. So tell me all about it.
Well, I think a lot of people look at success as not being on medication. Oh, well, she's not successful because she's not off of Suboxone yet. If we treat everyone that way, then everybody would have to be off medication at the same time. And we know that everybody's brains are different. Everybody's addiction was different, just like the route that we took drugs, how far we would go to get drugs. And so I think it's important to realize that, not every person is going to be off medication at a certain time that you think is appropriate. Believe me, I thought when I got on Suboxone that I would be on it for a year and then I would get off and it would just be all hunky-dory. But as life happened. I got a full-time job. I started working for just like a Hallmark here in Little Rock, and I started Real Talk Recovery. I started making videos advocating for medication-assisted treatment and trying to create a community for people to feel included and to be a part of. And next thing I knew, I was 3 years into it, honestly. Then I got my job working with Dr. B at American Addiction Institute out in California. And so I started being able to like work closely with people who were getting onto medication assisted treatment to help them through that process and to help give them resources to find like recovery support. And so about 3 years into being on MAT, 3.5 years in, I said, I think I'm ready to taper. So I went to my doctor at UAMS and I said, I'm ready to start a taper. And the way he explained it to me was, okay, this is going to take over a year. So just get ready. We're going to take it one day at a time. We're going to leave room for grace. If something happens in your life and you need to pause your taper, that's okay. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people on Suboxone is they feel like they're failing if they're not moving forward on their taper, if they're not jumping off fast enough. The way that the doctor did it with me is we started taking away 2 milligrams every 90 days. So every 90 days I would go down 2 milligrams. That gave my body 90 days to stabilize at each drop that I was experiencing. And then once I got down to where I'm at now, 2 milligrams, now I'm going to go down 0.5. In August, I go down 0.5. And so I'm slowly but surely chipping away. There was times though last year, like when coronavirus came, I was like, I am just dying here. Things were going on in my personal life. I was having a lot of depression. And so I paused my taper for about 5 months. You know, I said, I just need to stop where I'm at. I don't want to make any rash decisions. I don't want to, you know, do anything that's detrimental to my sobriety. And so, yeah, I've gotten down to, like I said, 2 milligrams, which I'm super proud of myself, you guys, because it's just like a psychological thing when you're taking away. Sometimes my brain tells me, are you sure that you need to be taking that away? And so it's like a back and forth with your brain. But it took me a long time to get to this point. Like I didn't just wake up and decide I'm going to jump off. I really made sure that my life was stable. I made sure I had gainful employment. I made sure me and my husband's relationship was strong. He wasn't using, I wasn't using. We had a place to live. Our son is in school. He's healthy. My family's nothing's going on in my family. Like just, these are all outside issues that could affect your taper or affect how successful you are in your taper. And so I didn't want anything like that to happen and me like go out and relapse, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm trying to think of, there's so much that we've talked about previously.
Yeah.
That I think it's just so important. I just want there to be as much information out there as possible because of everything that you've told me. So let me ask you this. There's a lot of question. I know you talked about the stigma, and you talked about the stigma with a 12-step program and what their definition of recovery was.
Right.
Right. Okay, and so I think a lot of times that we all think that recovery is being 100% abstinent.
Right.
Right. So I decided myself to do a little research, and I got on the SAMSA website, and SAMSA is the go-to for any information about mental health, substance use disorder, anything of that nature. And so they talk in here about recovery is the process of change through which people improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. So I don't know that I'll ever reach my full potential. Ever.
Me neither.
Okay? And so to be perfectly clear, and you told me that you had some people in your life. Was it your sister that you were telling me is also someone who takes medication for their mental?
Yes, my sister.
Okay, and you told me that she would probably be on it for the rest of her life.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that I will be too. Just like someone who has diabetes is going to be on their medication for the rest of their life.
Right.
So, tell me about your full potential and your recovery, where you're at and where you want to be in your recovery at your max potential, the greatest thing that you could ever possibly imagine. So, you know, and there are 4 major dimensions of recovery, of our health, of, you know, all the things that make our full potential. And so the first one is health, and we were laughing about this earlier. So do you feel like you make healthy choices and support your physical and emotional well-being to your max potential?
Not to my max potential. So, and this is what I hope you guys will take out there with you if you're in early recovery, to do the opposite of what I did. When I got sober, I was so focused on staying off drugs that I did not work on my health, my outside health, my body, my fitness. And so I started overeating and, you know, cross addiction, food addiction. It just like took control. And so addiction, it manifests in so many different areas of our lives. There was one point where I was like spending credit card money like it was going out of style. I thought I was rich or something, just cha-ching, cha-ching. So it's like my max potential health-wise would be for me to be in shape, to be my ideal weight, and to just be happy. The way I feel on the inside, I want to feel like that on the outside. I feel amazing on the inside. I feel like I'm finally whole again. I feel like I don't hate myself. I actually love myself. I have self-respect. You know, I didn't respect myself at all in active addiction, and I actually have love for who I am. I'm proud of how far I've come. I've worked so hard to get to where I'm at. And so I want to be healthy so I can be alive at 80 years old for my son. I want to be able to go outside and play basketball with him without dropping dead and having a heart attack. So health-wise, I still have a lot of improvement that I can be doing, you know what I mean? But I think that max potential is like we're always going to be striving to be a better version of ourselves every single day. And that's what recovery is. Recovery is trying to be better than you were the day, you know, back that day. Be better the next day, the next day. I think that a lot of times people get caught up with what medications you're taking. It's like recovery to me has nothing to do with what medications you're taking and everything to do with changing your behaviors and healing on the inside and learning to love yourself, respect yourself, and love and respect others.
That was awesome. Couldn't have said it any better. You know, and here's the thing. I realize that your community around you is fantastic. You know, I know that you have a great relationship with your mom, because I got an accidental text that was in response to her, so I know you love her. You know, your purpose. I have to wonder, would you be reaching as many people as you are today with your purpose if MAT wasn't a part of your life? Now, I know you're still going to be on fire for recovery, period.
Right.
But, you know, you have such a powerful story to tell. You know, 6 years of being without opiates and robbing people and you know, losing your children and all of those things, that's a long time.
Yeah.
We were talking about how you guys had, you know, worked on your credit, built your credit up.
Yeah, that's huge.
That is a big deal.
I can actually get credit cards now, which I couldn't. I had to file bankruptcy on $65,000 worth of debt because when I was in active addiction, I was buying every drug dealer a flat screen TV, all their girlfriends' purses. I literally was in debt up to my ears. And so the fact that me and my husband are like on the 700 end of this credit score is like a miracle,
That is, I mean, truly. And so, I mean, I can't imagine why, for myself, I know that every day I have to get up and have a certain routine. And so, you know, I just experienced this week. My psychiatrist decided that she was going to switch companies. And I moved from Hot Springs to Little Rock, and lo and behold, I look at one of my prescriptions, and I'm almost out. I have like 4 days left, and I don't have a psychiatrist. It's not just real quick to go out and find one.
Right.
And I'm freaking out. You know, and so what do I do whenever I don't have my medication? And so I sat down and I was thinking, because a lot of people say that recovery is also based on our actions, you know, and so the question becomes, what happens if you miss a dose of your medication?
Right.
And so I wondered the same thing, and I got my nifty little Google out, okay, and I'll let you tell what SAMSA has to say about it as well, but, you know, I ran across that issue this week. I have a problem that has to be solved with taking a medication every single day without fail.
Right.
And my history dictates that I'm a dingleberry and that I will do some really dumb stuff if I don't take care of my mental well-being.
Right.
So, having said that, what happens in the instance that, for whatever reason, you can't get your medication?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I totally understand why people would ask that about medication-assisted treatment. First of all, just overall, it's my responsibility to make sure that I have my medication, that I have a follow-up appointment, that I have all my therapy stuff in line. But let's say I can't get my Suboxone for a day. Let's say I can't get it for 2 days. Suboxone has a 37-hour half-life. I can wake up tomorrow and I'm fine if I don't take it today. I could wake up the next day and I'm fine. It's that third day where you start really experiencing any kind of like withdrawal. And even then, you still have some time to go into your doctor and get your prescription refilled. But I don't even worry about that because I'm so responsible with my medications that I'm constantly making sure that I have my refills. My husband has his refills. My husband's on a medication called Cymbalta for his mental health. And the other day he had ran out early and the doctor had not gotten him an appointment quick enough. And he was telling me, my head feels like it's detached from my body. My eyes are doing this thing where they're like shaking back and forth. And we were talking about it earlier. It's like, that's the same thing. When I tried to come off Lexapro in 2020, which is the worst experience of my life, I should never try to do that during COVID. It was probably one of the worst withdrawals I've ever had. Psychological medications that affect the chemistry of our brain, it made me want to take my own life. That's how hardcore it was. And I've been through opiate withdrawal 20 million times. But this was so much more intense than that because it was affecting my mental state. It was making me feel disconnected from myself. It was like I was having an out-of-body experience. And so now, from that experience with Lexapro, from seeing my husband with his experience with Cymbalta, and then us just knowing our medication, Suboxone, we make sure that our medications are filled. If they are, now what they're doing in bigger cities and states is you can go to the hospital for an emergency dose of Suboxone or methadone if you're someone who's like out of state and you can't get your medication that day. I don't know if Arkansas is doing that yet, but in California, you can go to the emergency room and get your medication if an emergency happened. Mm-hmm. So I think hopefully Arkansas will get to a point where if that happens and somebody's having an emergency, they can go and get their medication at the hospital, But I think it comes down to just being responsible, taking care of your priorities. If your recovery is a priority and medication-assisted treatment is helping you with your recovery, then your priority should be to make sure you have your medication. I mean, that's just, I'm pretty hardcore about that,
As am I. And, medication is something that I can't go without on a daily basis, just like you can't, just like a diabetic can't.
Right.
So I'm so grateful that you have been so transparent and that you came on the show today and put yourself out there for all of our viewers. I think in the state of Arkansas, there is a very large stigma on MAT. And, I think that for me, the last week, having the conversations that we've had and you being as open and honest with me as you possibly could be, have been, very eye-opening because prior to this week, my thought process was I tried it and it wasn't a go.
Right.
I got more high on it than I ever did what I was doing before.
Yeah.
And, I still was doing all of the bad behaviors that came along with it. The difference was, now that we've had all these conversations, I looked at all the other factors surrounding my situation. And I didn't have several other pieces of my life under control, including my mental health.
Yeah.
And so, that the possibility of letting MAT work for me, I never gave it the correct possibility because I didn't do everything that they ask you to do when you try it.
Right, right.
So I'm extremely grateful that you're here today, that you have, been so open. I really recommend anybody go check out her YouTube page, her TikTok, any of those things. She's really definitely a stigma breaker, for sure. And I'm so grateful that I got to meet you today. We normally give the last couple of minutes for you to say anything that you'd like to, so go ahead.
Okay. I just want you guys, anyone out there that's struggling with addiction, now you don't have the opportunity like I did to try 6 different ways to recover. You know, overdose deaths went up 30% in 2020. Okay, it's serious business out there. You're either going to get sober or you're going to die. And so instead of letting the stigma of medication-assisted treatment affect you, you know, reach out to somebody like me who's been through this, who's been on the medication. Ask questions. I'm not afraid of answering any questions you have. I'm going to tell you, if you want to get on medication-assisted treatment, you need to be prepared to do the work. You need to be prepared, if you want to get off that medication, to taper off the medication properly. It's really something that you have to be ready to do. And whatever pathway you choose to getting sober, I'm going to be there to support you, because that's what I needed when I got sober. I needed support. It was hard enough for me to make the decision to get on MAT. I already judged myself enough. I didn't need judgment from anyone else. I was hard enough on myself, you know, and so I just want people out there to know, whatever you choose to do to get sober, I will be there to support you. It should not matter what pathway you take. All that matters is that you're on the road to recovery, and that's what I got to say.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you for, you know, allowing me the opportunity to, you know, kind of see past some of my thoughts that I had previously. You know, I like to remain open-minded and willing to learn and teachable. And this week's been a great experience for that. I hope I can have you on here soon, or maybe I'll come on yours with you.
I would love that, for real.
That would be awesome. So thanks, everybody. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to ask us. And her stuff, all of her TikTok and her YouTube, all of the links are in the comments posted below. And please shoot us any questions that you may have, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you guys so much. Have a